All right. Hello, everybody. This is episode 6 of Blake and Vish Sports. I'm Blake with Vish right here. And today we're just planning on talking about some of the contenders, some general NFL. It'll be a shorter episode than the typical hour and 45 minutes. But
Yeah, we
Vish,
got finals.
yeah, we got school. That's starting to ramp up a little bit. So Vish, big win for your Niners over the weekend. Um, how was that game, and what were some of your big takeaways from that?
Yeah, dude. Huge win. Keeps them alive in the playoff race.
Yeah.
I went in depth on Monday on my big takeaways, but I
Hmm.
do want to stamp home the two big things from that game. I don't know if you got to catch it, but the two big things was that the defense played out of their mind, and this defense is still really good. Deebo Samuel is awesome and really special.
Yeah.
And the two best players in that game were Deebo Samuel and safety Jimmy Ward, who I know you know a lot about.
Ooh, yeah.
So he
I'm a
was
fan of Jimmy Ward. Big fan.
absolutely he played out of his mind. It was one of the better performances of 49 I've seen from a 49ers safety in my lifetime as a fan. It's kind of unfortunate that it hasn't been getting the attention it deserves. He was outstanding, as he has been for a lot of this year. But how about you? The big Packers. I was cheering for them. Obviously, never cheer for the Bears. That's the rules.
Of
You
course.
know those rules.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I was cheering for the Packers. And how about them coming up with a big blowout type win? How was that?
Yeah, so that was the Sunday night game. It was hyped up as one of like the typical Packers Bears, where it's the storied rivalry.
Oh, it was
Yeah,
typical
it's going to
Packers
be a
Bears.
great game. This game was not close from the start to the finish. Even at the end of the first half, you kind of knew who was going to win. It was already a blowout, and they continued to pour on them and beat up on the lowly Bears over the last few weeks. Have they lost what, like 5 in a row now? I want to say.
They started 5-1. They're 5-6.
Yeah.
You started off saying, well, this was hyped up to be your typical Packers Bears game. It was your typical Packers Bears game with Aaron Rodgers at
Of the last
quarterback.
decade, right?
Yeah.
That's how it's been, except for a few anomalies we'll go with. But so one thing today's episode we really wanted to talk about was some of the teams like the Packers, and you could almost say the Rams and Niners because they're hunting for playoffs, but specifically Packers and those other teams that are contenders as the season's starting to come more towards an end. And so, Vish, what do you think the biggest strength of the Packers is right now?
Yeah, the biggest strength is they have Aaron Rodgers as their quarterback, and they have Devontae Adams as their wide receiver number one. Their offense, I think LaFleur is good. He's pretty creative. He's a solid play caller. They have a good conceptually. They have a good offense, and Aaron Rodgers is just playing out of his mind. He's incredible. And it's funny because he was, I guess, regressing a little bit by Aaron Rodgers standards the
Yeah.
last 3 years, but he was still like a top 2 or 3 quarterback. And people were like overblowing it. Look, Aaron Rodgers is not the same guy anymore. He is still absolutely the same guy. It feels like this year also more than the physical plays, it's just mentally. He feels so ahead of what's
Mm-hmm.
going on, so ahead of what the defense is doing. That's why it feels like him and Devontae Adams can connect so easily. It's like, why aren't teams doubling Devontae Adams? Well, LaFleur is doing a great job of lining Devontae Adams up in different spots, and Rodgers is diagnosing everything pre-snap and getting Devontae Adams the right kind of route combination and getting him the ball. It's really awesome. Adams is playing out of his mind. I think as Jones gets healthier, they're going to have more of a run game. I am a little concerned about the injury to Lindsley, but it seems the Packers just
You can
insert
replace him.
random people into their offensive line, and they develop it so well. Like, how many different guys? I think we've talked about this before,
Yeah.
not on air per se, but we've talked about how the Packers, every few years, are able to take mid-round picks and lower-round picks and develop them to be Pro Bowl caliber starters in their offensive line. So I don't while I do have somewhat of a question about it, I don't think it's a real cause for concern. But yeah, overall, their biggest strength is just the fact that Aaron Rodgers is their quarterback, and as long as he's your quarterback, you have a chance to win any game.
I'm with you, and I'm gonna pivot a little bit, and you did mention it, but LaFleur, I think his play calling has been something. I think it's improved a lot since even last year. Being in the second year of an offense, I feel like teams can really break down their mistakes from year one and capitalize on that. And I think that's one of the things you see with quarterbacks, even how there's always the second year explosion. You have Kyler Murray, who's been even better than a lot better than last year. Lamar Jackson had his MVP season his second year. Goff looked horrible as the first overall pick, and then he started flourishing his second year. But I think LaFleur's play calling has improved drastically, and I think that's been one of the main catalysts in their improvement is guys are schemed open. How many times in the Mike McCarthy era did you see a tight end have a wide open touchdown like Mercedes Lewis had in that game? Not often. You would not see a wide open touchdown or a guy getting schemed open. What you would see is Greg Jennings or Jordy Nelson going off script and creating something out of nothing. I think that's the big, big change that's occurred, and that's their main strength is the improvement from the floor.
Right, and just to rip off what LaFleur is doing, right, I think they've evolved to the point where last year it felt like Rodgers learned LaFleur's offense, which is a version of what Kyle Shanahan and what Sean McVay do. And of course, in this offense, it's complex. So we've seen the second-year jump, right? Niners fans expected Jimmy to take the second-year jump that Matt Ryan took, right? It's documented. Matt Schaub took a little bit of a second-year jump. But this year, to me, it feels like LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers are on the same page. And LaFleur is not running it's not that Aaron Rodgers is totally running LaFleur's offense and LaFleur is just calling that same offense. It feels like they have a little bit of changes. There's a little bit more freedom for Aaron Rodgers to still come to the line of scrimmage, and if he sees Davante Adams in one-on-one coverage, just change a little bit and make sure and go to Davante Adams. There's still that type of stuff that was there with Mike McCarthy, but then they also have just the basics of the outside zone and the great play action pass game where we saw the big throw. I think they had one big throw. I forgot to whom it was, but it was very similar to the play that I think it was the same play the Niners. Actually, I might be blanking, but they ran the George Kittle play, the 60-yard touchdown from last year to Bobby Tonyan, I think. I don't know if it was against the Bears, but where it's play action, everybody's going one way, and then you flip the tight end back the other way, and he throws the deep ball because he's going to be wide open. It's a beautiful play call. They ran that kind of stuff. So they have a little bit of everything. LaFleur is, I think, people are really underrating how good of a job he's done.
Yeah.
He's kind of been one of the people who's taken the burden of being the guy who was hired because Sean McVay has been hired. It really helps him that Aaron Rodgers is quarterback, but it's also a really tough situation to come in as a very young head coach, your first time coaching, and have to take over a team with a very strong and established quarterback and a veteran team of established personalities. Mm-hmm. He managed to go 13-3 last year. They seem to be trending towards 12-4 this year, and they're both doing a great job. And I think we should pivot now to talk about their weaknesses because I think they have a couple of weaknesses that are similar to last year that are going to ultimately hurt them. What have you seen?
So they did just get Allen Lazard back, so he kind of helps with this issue, which is my biggest issue, and it's a second playmaker on the outside. They do have Davante Adams, who has been performing at a top 5 wide receiver level. He was the same last year when he wasn't injured, but when he gets doubled, who else can beat their man one-on-one or create separation or be able to be the outlet for Rodgers? Bobby Tonyan has flashed it. I think Allen Lazard has done a good job in being able to fill in for that second person role. Although, if you remember throughout Rodgers' career, Allen Lazard is not what he has had when he used to have the likes of Jordy Nelson, Greg Jennings, Cobb, all those guys when they just had a number of guys who could win one-on-one. Allen Lazard has proven that he can sometimes win one-on-one, and he's a really, really good blocker, which I love about him, but he's not that caliber of a second receiver that you'd wish to hope. And when he goes down and you're down to Equanimeous St. Brown and Valdez-Scantling, it's tough for them to get separation and come down with the balls that you need them to when Davante is getting doubled. And I think that's going to be one of their main issues in the playoffs is if they run into a team and they have to catch up because they're down. How are they going to manufacture yards and points if Devontae's getting doubled and the run isn't working as efficiently as it should?
Yeah, I agree with that. And, I didn't actually mind the Jordan Love pick that much. I think quarterback is such a premium position. Even if you have an Aaron Rodgers, it's always good to have somebody as a contingency plan just because their season is so reliant constantly on their quarterback getting hurt. And so you need somebody in there that you can have faith that can come in and do a little bit of something for you. And Aaron Rodgers is also old. So I didn't it wasn't while I wish they picked a wide receiver, a middle linebacker, a big defensive tackle, it didn't bother me as much as I think the national media just went crazy about it.
Yeah.
But I do agree with that. That number 2 receiver thing is a real problem. Rodgers, I think, more than anything, needs someone he can trust. Someone he can trust that's going to be at the right place at the right time, and someone he can trust where if he gets out of the pocket and looks to make a play outside of the pocket and outside the confines of their offense, that player will move, with him. Because if you watch him and Jordy Nelson or him and Davante Adams, they have such an organic chemistry and such a natural chemistry. Where if Rodgers gets out of the pocket, Davante knows how to find that open space and where to find it for Rodgers to throw him the ball. I think Lazard probably has, like you said,
He's improving, and he's showing signs of strength, like that he is capable of doing those.
Right, and he has the best chemistry, I think, of the guys there. I'm hoping they get a Kenny Stills. I don't think Kenny Stills. Yeah, he was at Niners camp. I don't know.
He's a returner, I think. He's more of a returner.
Yeah, but I'm hoping they get Kenny Stills.
That wouldn't be a bad pickup.
Right, Kenny Stills isn't this amazing player, but he would be a very solid option for them next to Davante Adams. And Valdez-Scantling, for his flaws and his inability to run great routes and precise routes, he's a good deep threat. He does get down the field, and he can make big plays. Equanimous St. Brown has looked better and better, but I don't think he's at the level they need him yet because they really need that guy right now. So I think between Lazard, Stills, and the other 2 guys, they could approximate they could approximate the value and the production. That was the word I was looking for.
Enough for like a 4th or 5th string receiver, right?
Right. That could be enough. My other big problem is that, they're only the 13th ranked run defense right now. So statistically, it doesn't look that bad, right? Because 13th ranked run defense, right, and 19th ranked scoring defense. Their run defense is a really big problem. Pettin likes to play nickel a lot, which means that they're always smaller on the field. And it doesn't help that they already don't have a lot of big people up front and fast, strong linebackers inside. So they struggle to stop the run. I think the reason their run defense looks better than it is because they're one of the best first quarter offenses in the NFL. They're extremely good as a first quarter offense. They do an excellent job in the first quarter of scoring points early and getting quick leads.
And their opening script for their offense is always very, very pristine.
Right, it's right on. They're only ranked 16th in terms of scoring in the first quarter, but typically that first drive, it's 5.5 points per game in the first quarter. But typically they get points in the first drive, and their script is solid where they can jump out, and that allows their defense to kind of force teams because of situations, scoreboard, to make them one-sided. But I'm still nervous that if they run into a team who's willing to run the ball the way Minnesota did, or the way the Niners did to them last year, they don't have big people inside, and they don't have fast linebackers. And it's really difficult to stop the run if you can't move people inside. You need size, and they don't have it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And that was kind of one of the things I really wanted them to address in the draft was get either that big defensive end, because they run a 3-4, so they have 2 defensive ends and a D tackle or a nose tackle. So either get one of those guys, get a really good middle linebacker who you can trust to get to the ball, like say Patrick Queen. He was someone who I was really hoping they would get. But yeah, they just don't have the size. Kenny Clark hasn't been as good this year, I feel. And one person who's been underwhelming has been Preston Smith. He hasn't done a good job of setting the edge. And even Za'Darius has his own downfall with that too. But he's a much better pass rusher than Preston is. So I think those issues could really be a problem, especially if they go down in a game. If they are losing by double digits in a game, do they have the number 2 receiver who Rodgers trusts to help them get back and score? And then when they're on the defensive end, are they going to be able to stop the run against a team that when you're playing playoff teams, usually they have at least a formidable run game. So
right.
that could be,
for me, that's the big question. Anybody who's watched our channel for the short time that we've done it, I've kind of had a trend on the teams I like. I like teams that can run the ball and stop the run. I think the game starts there. And when I say run the ball, you don't have to be a top-level run offense. Like the Patriots, for years were a very good running football team, but they didn't have this elite run offense. But they're in every game, you close out games in football by running the ball. That's how you win. You close teams out by running the ball. So you need to be able to run the ball situationally. That's why I believe that you have to be able to run the ball. The Packers, for the most part, can run it situationally, but they can't stop the run situationally. On gotta get it run stops, right? Patton tries blitzes. And if you're blitzing in certain gaps and stuff, it's anticipation. Well, I think they're going to run this play, and I'm going to bring pressure on this side. Well, if they run it to the other side, it's a busted big gain. So they can't stop the run because they're just not big up front and their linebackers aren't fast. So we'll have to see what happens. It's unfortunate that they didn't address it, and I think that's what's going to lead to their downfall. I think New Orleans is really the team that can exploit it the most, especially if they get healthier and how good their offensive line is. But we'll see. And speaking of New Orleans, you want to break them down a little bit? They're another contender.
Yeah.
The team doesn't have a weakness, but let's try to find one.
So I think one problem that could be the downfall of the Saints is mainly health of Drew Brees. It is unprecedented that there's two 40-year-old quarterbacks in the league in Tampa Bay, or Tom Brady, as well as Drew Brees. And Drew Brees is coming off a pretty severe injury where it was two punctured lungs. It was something with his ribs, right?
It was like 8 broken ribs and a punctured lung. It was way worse than – like it sounded like an injury that was a career ender, but they said 2 weeks. So I'm totally confused. Yeah.
So what I truly believe is he will not play the rest of the regular season for sure. I would be very, very surprised, especially if Taysom Hill is able to get them wins and get them into the playoffs. There's no need to. And for as good as Taysom Hill has been the last 2 weeks, it's not like they've really played quality opponents. You saw they played the Broncos, who were playing a practice squad wide receiver at quarterback. So you can't really make much statements after that one. And they played the Falcons, who they did handle, which is a good job that they did. But it's not like the Falcons are going to be pushing for a playoff spot. So I really don't trust Taysom Hill especially in the playoffs. I don't think he can make the throws necessary. He's a great athlete. Don't get me wrong. He can play any position in a situation, but as a starting quarterback, I do not see him having the capability of leading them anywhere.
Okay, so on paper, right, the Saints just have a million strengths and no weakness. Like they're loaded at every single spot. Mm-hmm. Their roster is so talented. Sean Payton is as good as anybody, right? Like you have can't guard Mike, who's one of the best receivers in the NFL. Kumaran is a top 3 running back, and Brees is efficient. The offensive line is dominant. Emmanuel Sanders and Jared Cook are a lot better than their numbers show. Yeah. And then their defensive line dominates games. Their linebackers, Demario Davis is playing out of his mind the last few games, and Quan Alexander is fast. They don't have Von Bell anymore, excuse me. Malcolm Jenkins and Marcus Williams are a good safety combination, very solid. And Marshawn Lattimore, when he wants to be, can shut down a lot of receivers in the NFL. And Janoris Jenkins is playing really well. Right, and their nickel, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, is really good. So everything on paper is really good. But for some reason, this team has been really good on paper the last 3 years, and they haven't won. And for me, I agree with you. But I'm actually going to go that it's not just Drew Brees' health. It comes down to Drew Brees. And, one of the underrated things with Drew Brees is that he hasn't played well the last 3 playoffs, right? We go back to the Minnesota Miracle game. Drew Brees started off that game playing really poorly, which is why they needed to come back. And of course,
till after the half.
Right. And, of course, he did play well. He is Drew Brees. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer, no doubt about it. And he did end up playing well, and they got unlucky with the Minnesota Miracle play. Well, the next year against the Rams, that was pass interference. Absolutely, the Saints got hosed. But he didn't play well in that game too. He had a chance in overtime to get the ball and he didn't play well. And last year against the Vikings, he didn't play well all the way up to the costly turnover when Danielle Hunter forced that fumble. They were, I think, very near to the red zone or right on the red zone.
Yeah.
And I know Ryan Ramczyk got beat, and I know Danielle Hunter's a beast, but you got to hold on to that ball. You can't fumble in that situation. So Drew Brees, even though he's this all-time great quarterback, he's had 3 kind of underwhelming playoff games. Well, who's to say it's not going to be 4? I don't know if they're going to have the dome, and if they have to go into Lambeau in the cold weather, like, can 40-year-old – we saw Drew Brees in Chicago in October when the wind is nowhere near what it is, struggle to throw the ball. I mean, everybody was struggling to throw it that day, but still Drew Brees struggled to throw the ball. So, I think he's kind of the thing that leaves me a little bit iffy on the Saints. Like, I picked them to go to the Super Bowl when we got asked the question last week, and I think the Saints are the most complete team in the NFL. But Drew Brees leaves me a little bit iffy on their prospects.
No, I'm with you on that. I know we've talked about this off camera a lot, but he has been incredibly underwhelming. In that game last year against the Vikings, I really don't think that Vikings team was all that great. I think the Saints roster was significantly more talented, and I don't think it's close, really. That was one of the first games where I thought, wow, Drew Brees he's getting close to being done. Like, you could see it. He doesn't really throw the ball that far down the field. And in that game, they were getting exposed. So I'm with you on that. We've already mentioned all their strengths pretty much. I mean, you just look at the roster and it's a major strength, just the talent they have. It could be the most talented in the whole league, to be honest.
So I got one more. So with Brees, real quick, throwing the ball down the field, yeah, it's a problem. He's definitely regressed in that area. You can't even argue that. That's just a fact. But I don't think it's that bad a problem because Sean Payton is so good and so creative. Yeah. They have a million ways to throw the ball short, and they have so many guys that catch the ball short. And Brees is so accurate, so smart. He's just got to play better. Like, he can play the same style of football he's playing, which is smart, short passes, accurate. But you got to play a lot better. And, the Vikings kind of unlocked something with the inside pressure of sticking Everson Griffin and Danielle Hunter inside on third downs and having them rush inside and rushing 4. Well, that got pressure. The inside pressure really hurt him. He's got to play better. My other thing is their defense is too inconsistent for my liking. Yeah. The last 4 weeks, they've looked like what they should look like, which is a top defense in football, top 5. They're loaded in every spot. Dennis Allen isn't anything special, but he isn't bad by any means. He's pretty good.
Average defensive coordinator, I'd say.
Right. So their defense just has to be better. I feel like there's too many moments where it's which Saints defense is going to show up. Sometimes when they're really up to play, they dominate the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and make it look like they're the 2000 Ravens. And then sometimes they'll look like a historically bad defense because they can't stop anybody. Their defense has played better the last 4 weeks. I want to see some more consistency. I want to see more and more consistency, but that would be my only other thing to really nitpick at with them because overall there has, like we've keep on reiterating, they're as loaded a football team as there is in the NFL.
Speaking of loaded teams, what are your opinions on the Steelers? They have one of the better rosters in the league, I'd say, both on offense and defense. What do you think some of their strengths are? And then maybe I could say some of their weaknesses, or we could go back and forth. But what do you think they do really well?
The Steelers, their defense obviously is just outstanding, and it starts up front. They're so physical. Like, the Steelers just impose their will physically on teams, and they have Stephon Tuitt coming back. Tyson Alualu is playing out of his mind. Cam Hayward is one of the best 3-4 defensive ends in the NFL. TJ Watt is in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. Bud Dupree is awesome. They lost Devin Bush. I thought it would hurt them a little more, but it doesn't seem to.
It hasn't hurt them as much as I think a lot of people thought it would, because he's a really good inside linebacker and he fits their team so well.
Right, and their corners, I think Joe Hayden, he had one bad year the last year in Cleveland, and people thought he was washed. He's kind of rediscovered himself playing for Pittsburgh. He's really good. Steven Nelson is all right. He was a good free agent signing for them. He's pretty good. And then, obviously, the 2 safeties, Terrell Edmonds is some hitter, some tackler. Not the best guy in coverage, but I feel like his responsibility always in coverage is difficult because the Steelers do so many exotic things with their blitzes. They leave him in a lot of tough spots, and that exposes him a little bit more than it should. But he's a really good player. And then obviously Minkah Fitzpatrick. Everybody knows how good Minkah Fitzpatrick is and how much he's helped. So their defense is 100% a strength.
Mm-hmm.
I still think their offense is a strength, and that's because they're very efficient on third down. That's been one of the more underrated things about this offense this year. Like, they're not the same offense they were. Like, before Big Ben, it used to be Ben stands in the pocket real tall, real strong, and waits, and they're throwing the ball down the field every other play with Antonio Brown and all of that. Now they're a little more ball control. Ben's a little shorter throwing the ball. I think his deficiencies throwing the ball down the field have been a little overblown. I don't think they've really had to throw it down the field, and I still think he can do it when he has to. But otherwise, he's been phenomenal in the short, quick game throwing the ball, and they have three guys that are pretty good wide receivers. I'm not the biggest Juju fan. I thought Juju was vastly overrated when Antonio Brown left, and people thought he could be a number one. But I think he's a great fit when you have three guys where a different guy's the number one every week between him, Deontay Johnson, and Chase Claypool.
No, I'm with you on their offense. And one thing that I think a weakness of their team is their ability to run the ball has not been as good as it has in the past. Even with James Conner, he's kind of been injured a little bit, but even with him in the past, I felt like they did a better job of running the ball. And obviously with Le'Veon Bell, his time on the Steelers was just incredible by any stretch of the imagination for a running back. But I think an issue with them is going to be running the ball.
Yeah, they're the 24th ranked run offense in terms of yards per game. They should get their attempts right because they should be ahead. So
they're usually winning all the time, and I think one thing with their defense is their defense puts them in really good positions. The defense puts the offense in good positions by forcing stops early, not letting the team get a bunch of first downs to pin them back on their own side of the ball. They force tons of turnovers, giving the offense a lot of chances. And it kind of reminds me of last year, almost the Ravens defense. They were very opportunistic in getting turnovers. So it works. It does work. And that's the makings of a Super Bowl team, to be honest with you, a defense that can be historic in the amount of turnovers and how well it does. But their inability to run could be a downfall they have for sure.
Right. I agree with you there. And then with their defense, there's going to be games where I feel like sometimes they were too reliant on their defense to score. Like before we came on here, I was watching. There were too many mental errors. I know they're coming off a lot of different things, and that's why. But sometimes, when you have to play Kansas City, you can't expect their defense is going to get the business because every defense gets the business ultimately because the rules are built just to make the offense get highlighted. So that would be my one thing. And then my other thing is, when is attrition going to catch up with this team? This team hasn't had a bye. They've had the wackiest schedule because of other teams' issues with the COVID protocol, be it Tennessee, be it Baltimore now. They've had to deal with a lot. I understand Mike Tomlin seems to be one of the best coaches in the NFL in terms of just ensuring that his team stays on schedule, on task, and focused at the job at hand. But the NFL season, there's a reason that teams with the bye usually make the Super Bowl, and they need that bye. They need to get the number one seed because without the bye, if it stays in the 7 playoff thing and doesn't go to 8, I think their bodies are just going to catch up to them because they're just not going to have rest. They didn't get a proper bye this year. They didn't get the proper Thursday night game rest. So I hope that I'm wrong when I say that, but because I really want them to win the Super Bowl this year. If I have a rooting interest without the 49ers, it's them, but we'll see.
Yeah, and that playoff spot, the first seed, is going to be even more crucial this year. Extra game, you never know what will happen in the NFL. So that 2 versus 7 seed, just even accumulation of injuries and mileage for the players is going to be a big component of it.
Yeah, So speaking of which, that number one seed, let's talk about the biggest contender against them for the number one seed, and a team that, again, like the Saints, just looks like they have zero weaknesses in the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah. So offensively, not much needs to be said. It's Patrick Mahomes with Andy Reid, and they've been spectacular for every season he's been there. I don't know if you've heard this stat, but the two leading receivers in the league are Tyreek Hill as number one. Can you guess who number two is?
Travis Kelce.
Yeah. So that's ridiculous in its own right. Similar to last year, how the Buccaneers had Evans and Godwin. They were both top 5 in yards, I believe, it's just crazy seeing that happen. And those two are both very special talents. Even the Buccaneers defense, which is pretty good, although it is very inconsistent, they were getting absolutely torched by Tyreek Hill. He was on pace at the end of the first quarter for 800 yards and 8 touchdowns. That is unheard of. So that is really good for them. But one thing that I do want to highlight, which is my weakness, is their O-line against the Buccaneers did not look good. Mahomes was getting hit almost every play. Schwartz was out, and I believe Mike Remmers he's either the left or right tackle, but he was getting just used and abused out there.
Yeah, let's be honest. Schwartz is maybe the best right tackle in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
So losing him is a big loss, and they don't know if he's going to come back. He's got a back injury, and backs are very iffy. So we'll see if he comes back.
Yeah, and speaking of Mike Remmers, I don't know if you remember him, but the
Carolina
2015 Super Bowl, he was the guy
Miller abused him,
attempting to block Von Miller, who ended up getting Super Bowl MVP. So that's who he is, for those who don't know. But yeah, I'm curious, what are your opinions, maybe a strength or weakness that the team has?
Yeah, they're loaded across the board.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I agree with the offensive line. I was actually going to bring that up because my thinking was at first when Schwartz comes back, this is going to improve. But they're not sure if Schwartz is going to come back. So obviously, if Schwartz comes back, this is going to improve a lot. But without Schwartz, we'll see. Regarding the roster, right? Everybody, I think sometimes it's kind of overstated how good Mahomes is in comparison. Like, their roster is stacked. It is stacked on offense and defense. They have talent in every single position. It's not to take away anything from Mahomes. He's still a stud. But I think there's a lot of guys on that roster that are a little unheralded. And I think Steve Spagnuolo has been kind of a godsend for them. He does so many creative things defensively, and it really helps them win a lot of games. For me, the one weakness I see is they seem to be struggling to rush the passer. They seem to be relying too much on – and Spagnuolo is great, right, because he can just come up with a bunch of different blitzes. They're the number one percentage team in terms of running cover zero, which is basically all-out pressure, no safeties in the middle of the field, man across the board. So they're the number one team in doing that. But they need more, right? They're paying Chris Jones so much money, Frank Clark so much money. Those are two premier players at their position. They need more from their pass rush. They need a lot more from their pass rush, to be honest. I think that's the only thing I would say, but I think that's a very fixable issue. My other thing with them is the only thing that's going to hold them back to me this year is complacency. That's the only way that I think they're going to be stopped. Where if they come off a little bit fat and happy because they just dominated the regular season, they won the Super Bowl, they dominated the playoffs last year, kind of a Packers to 2011 syndrome, where you come out and the 15-1 Packers, they're dropping everything against the Giants, who are this hot, angry road team that's rallying together, that fought to make it into the playoffs and all of that. So I think that's the only thing that's going to hold them back. They are coached by Andy Reid, though, who's as good as it gets, and he's always going to be laser focused at the task at hand. So we'll see. But to me, they're the most complete team in the NFL, and I'm very interested to see how teams play them in the playoffs.
Yeah, and with that too, if they can't get the first seed, they're going to have to play an extra playoff game, something they didn't have to do last year, and it really is a war of attrition in the NFL, and with all the COVID guidelines and rules, you never know who's going to be out for a team. So that extra game could be the deciding factor in who ends up being the champion.
Right. They haven't had much of the COVID issues that other teams have had. So good on them for being responsible. But, we don't know when it's going to kick in because some of these teams, like I know the Niners have been extremely responsible, but they still have players go. Same with the Packers. So we'll see. The other thing I did want to mention real quick, two things is one, I think that the extra playoff game. So if you remember last year, it took that Ryan Fitzpatrick drive against the Patriots late to make the Patriots get the 3 seed and the Chiefs to get the 2 seed. I don't know if they'll have that type of fortuitous luck this year because luck is very uneven in the NFL. And then the other thing is that with the Chiefs, they haven't actually played a road playoff game in the Mahomes era. I'm not saying they can't win on the road, but Arrowhead's a fantastic home advantage. I'm very – go ahead.
I was going to say it's probably a top 5 place to play for home field advantage. I mean, that – and it doesn't get talked about enough like Foxborough or CenturyLink did for the Seahawks.
New Orleans.
Yeah, New Orleans too. So, but yeah, go on.
Yeah, so I'm if they don't get that 1 seed and they have to play at Pittsburgh, I'm confident they could win that game. But it's a new thing, right? Because winning a road playoff game is a big deal. It's a really big deal. And so I'm really excited to see how that would go down. I'm hoping we could see it that way because Patrick Mahomes and their team is so good. Like, you would love to see them have a little more adversity and have to battle through it. And if they come out ultimately victorious, they do.
Yeah. So those were 4 teams we mentioned who we believe are certainly contenders for the Super Bowl. They're top of their conference. So I think that's it for that section of the video. We wanted to take some questions though, maybe 10 to 15 minutes or however many questions there are, you know. So if you guys have questions, NFL or NBA, feel free to ask. We'd love to help answer.
Yeah, and you know, there were other teams that we discussed prior, like Seattle. And I think if you discuss Seattle, even though Seattle, to me, Russell Wilson puts them just more on the precipice. I think that we've documented their strengths and weaknesses with their defense, and they definitely need to get back to running the ball. Though both those things look like they're improving, but we'll see. I think the Niners have a puncher's shot, but who knows? I think the Rams are still in the conversation, but I think Goff ultimately ceilings them. So there's more teams. You know, I'm a big Tennessee guy, but Tennessee's got to win that division first. So there's a lot of teams still there, but these are the 4 that we identify as really the main contenders.
And with NFC too, or sorry, AFC, we like that conference is loaded. There's so many teams that have 6 or 7 wins that could sneak into the playoffs.
I like this one. Will the Ravens make the playoffs?
So I recently, I think, mentioned this last time, but honestly, looking at their schedule and looking at how the AFC conference is now, I don't think they'll make the playoffs. Especially, I know there's the game going on right now, Wednesday afternoon football. But will they win this one? I don't know. I've been reading the comments a little bit. RG3 ain't doing too hot. And what would that would put them at 6-5 then? I believe they're 6-4 right now.
6-5. And you have Cleveland that's 8-3. You have Miami that's 7-5, and then you have Oakland that's 7-5. So they'll be right there.
They do have the tiebreaker over the Browns if the Browns implode, which is, I mean, you never want to bet your money on the Browns, even for the last 20 years. But I don't think they will. And it's kind of sad because they were heralded as the top team coming into this year. As the Chief probably, but you know, Colin Cowherd predicted him 16-0. They added Calais Campbell, they got Ngakoue, they added all these guys, but still.
So I actually misspoke. The Browns are 8-3. The Dolphins are 7-4. Indianapolis is 7-4, and then you got Oakland and Baltimore at 6-5. I'm gonna say no. I don't think they're gonna make the playoffs. I think their losing schedule is a little difficult. I just think with all this COVID and people coming in and out, I think it's kind of just washed their season at this point. It's going to be tough for them to rally and make a run. Their defense is still really good. Their team's still really good. Lamar's still really good. John Harbaugh's still really good. But it's just unfortunate how it worked out for them.
Did you want to do the Celtics question?
Sure.
All right. So you can go first on this. What do you think of the Celtics? Do you think they're championship caliber or they still need to add stuff?
I don't think there's championship caliber. And it's not because I think Brad Stevens is the top 5 coach in the NBA. I think that Jason Tatum is an upcoming superstar. I love Jaylen Brown. I didn't know why he wasn't given any all-defensive team votes last year. What he did to Pascal Siakam last year in the playoffs just tells you what a good defensive player he is. I think that Marcus Smart is an excellent defensive player. But for me, I'm just not a big Kemba Walker fan. I didn't like the contract that they gave to Kemba Walker, and ultimately, I don't think they have enough depth around him. For me, when I watch them play basketball, it always feels like their offense doesn't run smoothly with Kemba Walker as their primary ball handler, and I feel like he doesn't do enough to make plays for others. For me, it felt like Gordon Hayward and Marcus Smart did a better job of establishing others within their offense. And then the other problem is that Kemba is just such a defensive liability. Whenever you get deep in the playoffs, people are just going to expose Kemba Walker in the playoffs. I think that's ultimately what's holding them back. I'm excited to see how they pivot, because to me the pivot right now is you've paid giant contracts now to both Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Try and create a roster filled with depth around those two, because those are your stars, not Kemba Walker. Moving off Gordon Hayward was fine, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think getting rid of Gordon Hayward was just apparently they were in consideration of offering him over $20 million, which he keeps getting paid. So apparently teams really like his potential in the future, even with the injuries that have occurred to him. I'm with you on Kemba Walker. They're paying him a lot of money to be the guy, to be the point guard of the Boston Celtics. And I feel like he's more of a Charlotte guy in a smaller city who people will glorify, but I feel like he's not, maybe the lights aren't bright enough. I don't know if that's the right term, but I don't think he's a top 5 point guard, and they're paying him to be, and he's not good enough in the playoffs. And I think that showed against the Raptors. He was shooting horribly.
Yeah.
You're paying this man a lot of money. I don't know his exact contract, but it's
not too bad, actually. They have him just under the max. I think it's like the max. I think they got him for like a few $1 million below the max. But the problem with that is that, he was a starter in the All-Star game, which to me was just wild. How Kemba Walker, and I love Ice Trae, but how they both were the starting point guards for the East is just mind-blowing to me.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not a two-way player. He's not a particularly great distributor in terms of just running your offense like a Kyle Lowry. He's not a great, efficient offensive scorer, not at the level of Kyrie, definitely, though he brings a better personality balance to their team. I just think that they need to just start and driving volume with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, because their future is in both of their hands.
Yeah, I'm with you. Any other questions you want?
Yeah, there's a lot of good ones.
That was a good question, though, from Jaeger.
So, you want to do this one real quick?
I think if the 49ers or if the Cardinals lose, the Niners will have a better chance because that's one of their competitions. So, in a nutshell, yes. But for the Niners, for me, even if they make the playoffs, I honestly think they'll get smacked. I don't think they could maybe win one playoff game. If they do make the playoffs, I still think their team is too injury riddled to make a push for the Super Bowl. I think they'd be better off not making the playoffs, getting a better pick. I mean, you can make the argument that it's bad for culture, like instilling a losing culture and whatnot, which is a fair point. I can totally see that. But if they make the playoffs, I don't really think they'll do anything.
So to me, the Niners this year are the Steelers from last year, right? Like there was a point last year when the Steelers, I think, were 7-4, 7-5, and then their schedule and Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph caught up to them, and they finished 8-8. The Niners, they seem to pull out every time we write them off. They seem to pull out this brilliant win that says, "Oh, they can do it, they can do it." The consistent trend this season is that they lose everybody versus the Jets, great win versus the Giants, meltdown versus Philly, meltdown versus Miami. Then they come back, rally. They beat the Rams on Sunday night. They beat New England. Rough. Everybody's like, they're going to beat Seattle. This is the Niners team that's coming. Rough game versus Seattle. Then they lose everybody, rough game versus Green Bay. And then their defense plays out of their mind versus the Saints. And, some things hold them back, and they lose by a considerable amount, even though it was a close game. So I'm not going to even – to answer your question, if the Cardinals lose this week, it would help the Niners technically on paper. But the Niners still have a lot of work to do themselves. I want to see if they can string together some consistency. We shall see, because they're going through a lot between having to move to Arizona and all of that. If Kyle Shanahan gets this team to 8-8, even 7-9, it would be Coach of the Year worthy, in my opinion. You want to do this one?
Yeah, that is a good question, because for me, dark horse would be a team no one really thinks can pull it off, or not many people are talking about. So in the AFC, I would say Titans, just because they did. I know that's probably your team, and you're a big fan of them, but considering they went there last year and they won a couple of really tough road playoff games in Foxborough and then in I'm not sure what the Ravens stadium is, but they won against the Ravens.
Maryland, Baltimore.
Yes, they won in Baltimore. And I think that just that experience, especially with Vrabel, will be really, really solid for them in pushing for the playoffs this year and then in the playoffs. I do think they will make it as a wild card, so they're going to be a road team again. But I think they could get there, and Derrick Henry in the winter, and you don't want to tackle that man. You saw what happened last year against that Ravens team. Earl Thomas was talking. He's like, "Oh, we're ready for him," and then get to the playoffs, and Derrick Henry was stiff arming him multiple times on the same run. So he's a different animal in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's right on. I would go with the Tennessee Titans too. They have a clear identity on how they want to play football, and that's really important. If you know that you're going to be a run-first team and you're going to build your team game off the run game, you're going to take that and you're going to do that wherever you go, which means that, it's not going to be a game plan thing where they come in and they just get totally beat down by a team. You're going to beat the Titans at their best because they know how they're going to play football. It's very simple. It's actually not that simple. They have a pretty complex offense, but their identity is simple. It starts with Derrick Henry and riffs off of that. Ryan Tannehill is a really good quarterback, so we'll see. There's quite a few good ones. Let's do this one on the NBA.
That's a good question. So, I think
you want me to go? Because I got it right now.
Yeah, you can go if you have them right off the top of your head for sure.
Lakers, Bucks, Clippers, Nuggets, Nets.
I'm with Lakers. I'm with you on that one. Same with Clippers. Those LA teams are amazing. I really like the Nuggets again too.
Go ahead. My fault.
One team that I would remove from yours is the Nets. I think they'll implode a little bit. I think having two people who just hate the media is going to be a problem. And Kyrie to the media, I mean, let's put it this way. Kyrie believes the earth is flat. He ain't the brightest. He's not the brightest guy. And KD, he definitely is hated by the media, and he kind of has that snarky attitude, I would say, towards the media. So we'll see how they do. And also with Steve Nash, I think him and D'Antoni, because D'Antoni's a part of the staff too. I think that'll be very interesting to see. But are they going to boss around Steve Nash? Because I mean, they played in the league at the same time with him, although they were young. So it'll be really, really interesting to see. Don't get me wrong; they have the potential to go all the way. Because having KD and Kyrie is just nuts. Is KD gonna recover from his injury though? I mean, he's over 30. He just had an Achilles injury. That's big. But I could very well be wrong. I just think they'll implode at some point in the playoffs with the locker room issues.
So who would you replace them with? I got two teams. One is obviously Miami, right? They're going to play even better in their system, a little older. And then my other team is Dallas. I think this is the year Luka Doncic becomes the MVP of basketball.
I think I'm with you on Bucks too. I think they'll be, in the race there. I think the Heat, this is kind of something that doesn't get talked about enough. So they have a pretty inexperienced team, sans Jimmy, right? I think the bubble was a perfect environment for them. Not having to go and play away games for young players is pretty big because when you get into those late game moments and it's really tense and you're in an away game, I think that is an aspect that the bubble wasn't able to replicate. And their team is younger. You know, they have Hero, they have Robinson, Bam's on the younger side of things. Jimmy's kind of the only guy, and Dragic, who have really been in the playoffs numerous times. So I think that's going to hurt them. And I'm with you on the Mavs. I think Doncic is fantastic. And their team improved this offseason, I believe. So I think they'll be top five NBA team.
So I actually agree with what you said on the Heat too.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they're still going to be good enough to be around the top teams in the NBA.
Yeah,
it's not going to be like last year's playoffs. I thought a lot of Tyler Hero's production, like not that he wouldn't have been good in the normal playoffs. I thought he was enhanced by the bubble. It's totally different taking that flight and playing every 2 games and going to Boston, and playing as we call it in the Garden. The God in Boston barely loses there.
They're just lucky it's not the Mecca. They're lucky it's not the Knicks.
Yeah, true.
That'd be tough.
For Boston, it's an automatic 3 wins there, so we'll see. But I do like that point. This is about our guy, Justin Herbert.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I do think they have a Super Bowl window. So my thing with rookie quarterback contracts is it can't just be any rookie quarterback. Like they have to be they actually have to be good. You can't just I think Trubisky, Jake Locker, Ponder, dudes that have just not been good quarterbacks. And you're like, oh, but rookie contracts, you can load up the team. You can have a great team, and if your quarterback's that bad, you're not getting anywhere. But I think Herbert is really, really good. And so the way the rookie contract works is you get 4 years and then you get a team option, which is that 5th year it's still cheaper. It's very well below market value. I think Baker's is like $10 million or something like that. So they have 4 years to just build a super team pretty much and accumulate as much talent as they can before they start paying Herbert a ton of money. You saw the Ravens do it with Lamar, getting Campbell, trading for Ngakoue. So that's, if you want an example of what they should do, it's look at the Ravens. So I think they have a good window.
Yeah, I agree. Their roster is still loaded. Hopefully their injury luck is better. They have a top 5 offense and a top 10 defense. They should not be this bad. I love Anthony Lynn. I cheer for the guy. It's not that I love him particularly as a coach, but I watch a little bit of Hard Knocks. He feels so genuine, kind of guy you want to root for. Fortunately, I think he's in over his head. Their in-game management is just a mess. I think that's the number 1 requirement for a head coach before offensive and defensive acumen. Can you manage the entire game in-game? That's why a guy like John Harbaugh, who's a special teams coordinator, is so successful as a head coach. They have a phenomenal plan on this team. We want to attack this way on offense, this way on defense, and this is how we're going to play the entire game and attempt to play the entire game. That's key. Got to manage the clock and all of those things. But, yeah, I do think that this could be a big window. We'll see if they even let him go. The ownership with the Chargers is a little bit of an issue, but they absolutely got a quarterback. And if anybody saw the Joey Bosa mic'd up video, their defense is serious.
Yeah, they do have talent now. They need to improve on it, though, for sure.
Yeah, there were a few more good ones. Let me find them. There was one more. A couple more, actually. This guy wants to know if the Warriors should trade Draymond Green.
So should they trade Draymond Green if he does not prove anything? So if by not prove anything, I think that can be taken a couple ways. Does he show that he's regressing a little bit from his former when they were, they had the big run? When he's not playing at that level, but he's still an above average player, role player? Or is he just looking like he's an absolute scrub, like Stephen A. Smith describing Kwame Brown? Is he that level? Then yeah, they should trade him. I don't know what he wouldn't have any value. I think he's such an integral part of that Warriors team, and if they're a team that I think they'll make the playoffs. I'm pretty certain they will make the playoffs if Steph is healthy. I don't think they'll trade him. I don't know what they would even like. They'd probably have to trade picks to get him off the team if he's playing that bad, right? And at that point, I just wouldn't think it'd be worth it to get rid of him. And I know as teams kind of fizzle out, I think of the Lakers. I know Draymond's not as good as Kobe was, but remember when they just gave Kobe that huge contract, kind of like a farewell, like thanks for all your years of service. I think the Warriors would consider doing that with Draymond, or at least keeping him around just to mentor the young guys. So I just cannot picture him in another jersey. But Tom Brady did it, so it happens, right?
So to me, Draymond Green is one of the simplest players in the NBA. He's very good at playing for the Golden State Warriors. The way they play basketball, it highlights all his great skills, his incredible IQ, his defensive versatility, his ability to pass the basketball. So all of those things. In long story short, no, I don't think they should trade him. And if they do have to trade him, it's going to end up being a salary dump, which means that they're not going to really get equal value of what he means to
They're
them.
getting rid of assets, right?
So yeah, I don't think he's like. I think Warriors fans often think that they have the assets right now to pursue a lot of different players and teams and stuff. While they have excellent players in Steph Curry and unfortunately what happened to Klay Thompson be still excellent, I think in terms of assets, they're kind of locked up. They have a couple picks here and there, but that's only one or two picks. And these contracts are a little bit rough. They still have an excellent team. I agree with you. They should make the playoffs as long as Steph Curry is healthy. So yeah, I don't see any reason to trade him out here. Let's just comment on this real quick. No, he can't turn Detroit around. I was very upset to see that my Pistons signed him. It's unfortunate. We'll see if he actually becomes something.
I think the best thing that Jello can bring to the team would be the motivation for the Pistons to trade for LaMelo and maybe Lonzo, maybe get all three of the Ball brothers on the same team. That would probably drive up attendance for the Pistons if that's what their owner was looking for. That'd probably be the best case scenario. Or he would just be a good person for them tanking, like a good tank commander. Will he even make the roster and play? I don't know. That's a whole other question, but I don't think it matters at all. It's pretty irrelevant.
You got one for this?
Yeah. I think one team for certain that's gonna turn it around will be the Bengals. I think Burrow is legit. I think them getting a top pick this year is really going to help them get another person towards their team. Will they be first? No, but I think they'll probably make the playoffs. They have a really tough division, but I think they're going to turn it around, and they won't be a bottom 10 team.
So 2 weeks ago, before the Burrow injury, I would have also said the Bengals. The team I'm going to say is also a team I picked to win their division this year, but I think they're going to go and be one of the better teams in the NFC. That's the New York Giants. I like what they're doing. I like what Joe Judge is doing. Maybe get a couple more offensive linemen. Saquon Barkley comes back, a couple more weapons for Daniel Jones, and hopefully he continues on this trend of protecting the football better. And I think they could have a really good team. Their defense is really good. And then worst to first, the New Orleans Saints is the easy answer.
Yeah.
Their cap room and their just veteran roster is just making it seem like even they know that it's a last year hurrah for them.
It's a win now team. I think they're well over the cap, and I know that's just a number. For me, the salary cap's kind of almost imaginary because it's all just accounting tricks and just playing with it to move money around. But like Drew Brees is on his last leg, I believe, and he gone soon.
Yeah, I'm 20. I'm gonna be 21 in like 12 days. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know where you get the 25 or 15. To me, I always look the same. But yeah, I'm 20. Blake is 21, so he's a bit more legal than me.
Yep. Was there any other? We could probably do like one more question.
Yeah, maybe one or two. This guy's been asking it a couple of times, so Caleb, I got you. I do think that Go ahead.
I was gonna say no. I think the AFC. It's pretty clear cut that the Steelers and Chiefs are the two best teams in the league. And I think they're kind of in the tier of their own. I think the NFC teams all have just glaring issues where you can look at them and say, this is a big problem. Maybe not the Saints. You could maybe throw them in that top tier, but it's tough for me to trust Easy Breezy down in New Orleans. And I just think the AFC is just a whole heck of a lot better. I don't think there's really any NFC team that matches up well against them either.
Yeah, I feel the same way. You know, the Saints are the one team to me that feels like they got the complete roster to do it, but I don't know. Again, we've kind of outlined the strengths and weaknesses. I felt like for both the Steelers and Chiefs, we were reaching for weaknesses. So,
and we're going to be releasing some of those clips just on specifics for the team, so that way you don't have to search through the this live stream to find them. So like in the next couple of days, if you want to like look at our specific reasoning for each team, the top 4 contenders or who we believe are the top 4 contenders, then go ahead.
All right, we'll do 2 more questions. My man Gavin wants us to answer this one, I think, from DNMH. Is this the one you want, Gavin? Because it's the Bengals. The Niners' offensive line has moments of bad, but I think people are really overblowing how bad it is. It's a bad offensive line, but it's nowhere near as bad as Cincinnati. I talked about it. I think Grant and I got in a bit of an argument about it, but there's bad offensive line play across the NFL. It's all bad. Teams are getting whooped. Like the Niners are not the anomaly; they're the normal. So I do think that the I do think that the Bengals offensive line is much worse.
I'm with you on that. I think the Niners, and they do a good job of sometimes masking those with being able to get the ball to Debo and Kittle and Ayuk in space quickly, and that can kind of slow down the pass rush using their speed to that advantage. And the Bengals don't have that. They have a more typical drop back, and we have Higgins, we have Boyd, or more typical.
We have Burrow.
Yeah, and Burrow is he's getting killed back there. We've said it every single episode. Yeah. I think they did get Jonah Williams in the draft a couple of years ago, and he was out his rookie year. But besides that, they really haven't put that much capital into their team, and they need to start doing it. I hope they either them or the Chargers get the Oregon tackle Sewell, I think his name is, but he's supposed to be a generational tackle, and so hoping one of those teams can pick him up and protect these young quarterbacks so we can see their careers flourish.
So, yeah, and 2 more things with that. One, they had games where they started guys off the street because they had injuries and didn't have replacements. So it's not been anywhere close to as bad for the Niners. Good quarterback play and movement from your quarterback can help mask an offensive line. Joe Burrow did it all year. Justin Herbert's doing it. A lot of guys are doing it. Russell Wilson has done it for years. Kyler Murray has been doing it.
But those guys,
Mahomes, I mean, we talked about how the Chiefs' offensive line isn't playing that great, so there's 2 to it. And number 2, the Bengals' O-line can't run block. The 49ers' O-line can still run block, so it's absolutely the Bengals.
Trent Williams is also way better than any lineman the Bengals have.
Generally, he's one of once in a lifetime. So we'll take a couple more. Blake, you want to start off?
Yeah, so I go to the University of Iowa, and I'm studying accounting, and I'm a junior, and that's pretty much it. Packers fan. You can go, Vish. I don't know if you want any more detail than that.
Yeah, so I'll answer 2 and 1. No, I'm not from India. I'm born and brought up in Chicago and around Chicago. And yeah, I'm a computer science major. I'm a junior in college. That's about it. But yeah, we have finals coming up, so the content is going to be a little less consistent the next 2 weeks. But we'll ramp it up again once winter breaks start and do a couple more lives.
Any other questions? Sorry to see outsiders. I just want to highlight this. go to FanDuel. I'm a supporter of FanDuel, and if you want good bets, check out the betting guides we have. So we talk about best bets, the game to stay away from, some locks, all that good stuff.
Yeah, and then Eric, I don't do DraftKings. Do you, Blake?
I do FanDuel. So I used to do like the daily fantasy sports betting. So like that'd be like I pick an individual game and I do that, but I don't do any I don't do too much. I usually just do like straight bets.
All right, guys. We've reached an hour and 5 minutes. We were originally planning to go about 30 minutes, but we kind of played it by ear. We reached an hour and 5 minutes. We thank you all for joining us. It was real nice of you. We'll be back either on Friday or next Wednesday. We'll see, all depending on our final schedule, but we'll be posting stuff throughout the week. In the meantime, check out some of the other videos in our channel. I mean, we did an interview with 49ers strong safety Jaquasti Tart a couple weeks ago, so check that out if you've missed it.
Grant Cohn.
What?
Grant Cohn.
Oh yeah, we had the man Grant Cohn on too. So check out that video if you get a chance. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe to our channel as always, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.